Hi, welcome to another Crabs, Goats and Goats. My name's Anthony Wilson. Thanks for joining me. I'm talking now about the lunar eclipse on Friday the 19th of November. Lots of energy going on with this one. Let's have a look at the various things it can bring up. So first of all, this is something of a climax to November. After this date on the 19th, things should not be quite as pressured as they have been leading up to this point. However, there'll still be plenty of planetary tension around, just not at the height of the level it gets this week. So this is a week to see what's happening and not get yourself into any trouble, because I've called this eclipse Something's Got to Give. So the energy of Scorpio, which is water and fixed, versus the energy of Taurus for the moon, which is about material consolidation and conservation. But this is mixed with the energies of Mars in Scorpio, Saturn in Aquarius, Uranus in Taurus, and also Mercury at the moment in Scorpio as well. And this is naturally meaning there is tension between the fixed signs and what they desire, because the fixed signs are all about having objectives, maintaining pressure, keeping going and not stopping and giving up on something. If it's Aquarius, it's kind of like intellectual ideas based. If it's Taurus, it's kind of material based. It's based on what's real, whether that be something we own or something we have. At least it's based on a reality and a proof and a solid grounding, which is Taurus. And then in Scorpio, it's based on a desire. It's based on an objective that we want to work towards, and Scorpio drives towards that. And when the sun is in Scorpio, like it is now, it's a time to go after something, and it's a time to know what you want. For any sign really, depending on what house of the zodiac Scorpio falls in your horoscope. But the transits right now, as I mentioned in the last video, the transits right now are leading us towards it, not necessarily leading us in the right direction. So they will build up pressure where we don't want it. They're building up pressure in areas where we are going to have to confront things that are not easy to confront, to deal with something that's not necessarily working that well. It's not based on anything solid enough to work. So this full moon is the climax to that period where we recognize, we have to recognize what's not working. We have to say this has gone far enough. So whether that provides a resolution to a situation or not is another matter, but there is an internal realization. There's lots of R words at this full moon. Resolution, reckoning, recognizing, realization. All these things are to do with a moment when you find out more where you stand than you previously did. And what eclipses typically do is they put down a marker. And from this moment, life isn't quite the same. Now, of course, we have an eclipse every 6 months, a lunar and a solar eclipse, sometimes both, like it's not that every eclipse is going to be dramatically marking the ground for every person, but this one is pretty strong. So you look at the house where it is in your birth chart, and you can see there that things are changing. You can see there that there's this moment where, I've got to move. I've got to find a way to make this work. In some cases, it could bring developments that bring you out of yourself more. If you've been hiding something, it can bring stuff out for the good. unfortunately, the planetary drama that we have is Uranus and Saturn. This tends to be stuff that's been hidden, that's coming out, that's not good. Saturn pulls out stuff that weaknesses that we need to focus on, because if we don't, Saturn will pull us up and knock us. So Saturn being involved with this Scorpio eclipse this time, it for many people there will be an element of, okay, I need to learn a lesson here, and let's not pull any punches. This eclipse brings pressured energy, it brings tough energy, it brings energy that brings stuff to the surface we don't necessarily want. But there is a possibility as well that if you've been waiting for something to move on that has been growing, eclipses can bring that development, fruition, sometimes quite unexpectedly. And eclipses do bring unexpected things, and for an astrologer they're quite hard to work with, actually, because when you look at a transit from an outer planet, or a long-term transit to a natal planet, while you can't be a fortune teller, you can work with the parameters of what possibilities can come up. Eclipses can often bring up stuff that you weren't expecting, and that works for astrologers too. I look forward to eclipses in a way because they bring up stuff that I wasn't expecting. And with all my lunar energy in my chart, I should be better at that. But last year, for example, the lunar eclipse at the end of November, early December, the eclipses at that time brought up stuff that I found hard to deal with. But in the end, they made me realize what I had to do. And this is what eclipses do. They kind of expose and illuminate, but not in an easy way. If you want to grow, if you're truly dedicated to doing something better, then an eclipse will show you how, but it won't, or show you what to do. It won't necessarily show you how, but it's a moment not to be too extreme about anything in a weird way, because these planetary transits are extreme by comparison. The ones I talked about in the last in the last podcast. So we've got Mars involved with Saturn and Uranus this month, and there's a lot of pushing and people pushing hard in directions that are not compatible with each other. And Mars is still opposite Uranus this week. It's just completed a square with Saturn last week, and it's still within orbit of that square now, and all the time it's in Scorpio, it's going to be somewhat provocative in terms of that ongoing square between Saturn and Uranus. So these are energies that are pushing us towards something, to try and achieve what we want, but sometimes too much at this point. I talked in the last podcast about knowing when to jump off, and this is very much a theme for the eclipse as well. It's knowing where your limits are is an important thing to bear in mind now at the eclipse. This is something I haven't done for a while, but let's have a look at, seeing as we're in Scorpio season, let's have a look at some musical artists born under the sign of Scorpio. I'm going to talk about three in particular that I just want to look at in terms of what I see as the essence of Scorpio in music. So I'm going to choose Joni Mitchell, Björk, and Frank Ocean. All solo artists, and when you say solo artists, they are very individual. They're people that have such an enormous need to control what they do, which is Scorpio, that it would be impossible for them to be in a group almost as artists, because they have so many things coming out of what they're doing. It's not they don't work with other people. They've all worked with all kinds of really gifted musicians, all of them. So let's start with Joni Mitchell to begin with. So if you look at her career, she starts off as a kind of folk singer, kind of cutesy almost, like poet, very good poet, very strong voice, much more interesting voice than her contemporaries. But then as she develops as an artist, she just looks for more depth, and this is a Scorpio. This is a Scorpio thing to keep the motivation comes within, and where fixed signs are lucky compared to the other two types of signs, and fixed signs are, just to remind you, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio. Where they have this, they have an intrinsic motivation. Everything, they don't need to look to other things. They're often worried about who's gonna hurt them or who's gonna take away their power, and this motivates them. It almost comes from a fear, but it's like a driving force. And Joni Mitchell, unlike a lot of artists who tend to peak after 2 or 3 records, peaked late. I mean, her best stuff isn't for the first 4 or 5 years. Not that that's not great, the first 4 or 5 years of her catalogue, but in the early 70s and mid 70s, she began to produce what are now regarded as masterpieces, working also with jazz artists in a way that was completely her, but still used all her jazz influences that she was listening to at the time. And the respect for Joni Mitchell across music genres is immense. Like, she has an appeal that goes right across genres. And a lot of people who listen to Joni Mitchell don't listen to much other folk or much other jazz, or she will, but then of course she will be popular with people who listen to those types of music as well. So this is in music, Scorpio needs to be original and authentic and deep, and these are the key words to all the artists that I've just poured out. So, and they're kind of all these 3 artists. I mean, I know you can say this about a lot of artists in a sense, but all these 3 artists, Joni Mitchell, Björk, and Frank Ocean, they kind of love them or hate them. I mean, I don't know if anyone hates Joni Mitchell especially, but it's like, people just don't really get it with Joni Mitchell. They don't really understand why she's so hugely popular. Because people who love Joni Mitchell adore Joni Mitchell, and the same goes with the other 2 artists. They have a fan base that is absolutely adoring. So Björk is very similar in a sense, in that she started off as an indie artist with the Sugar Cubes, and they were doing, I wouldn't say it was standard indie music at the time, but I mean, it was very interesting when it came out. It was great when those records came out. I remember that. But what she then became later was there wasn't a clue to that at that time. And she, again, just like Joni Mitchell, worked with all kinds of people that broadened her musical base to a point where she could be a real artist, as opposed to, a flavor of the month or whatever, so that there is a Björk, by the way, is triple Scorpio. She's Sun, Moon, and Ascendant in Scorpio. So if you really want to see a Scorpio artist, I actually remember one of my great memories of working in the 90s in Equinox, the astrology shop in Covent Garden, was she came into the shop once, and actually ordered a birth chart, ordered a year forecast over the counter, and my colleague served her, and I was like, I couldn't even speak to her. I just saw her and I just went like, I can't even. I was too I was too shy just to speak to her at that point. It was but I was also really thrilled as well. Like, it was like, wow, this is incredible, because I actually then was able to see her chart immediately. So the last artist, Frank Ocean, I'm going to pull from those 3. I got divorced in 2010, and while that divorce had been coming, and I wasn't really like broken up because of the divorce. I was in a part of my life where I really didn't. I was completely broke. I was surviving hand to mouth really for a couple of years. It was two of the most difficult years of my life. However, it was also really invigorating to be having to rely on my work to provide me with my future kind of thing. So I discovered at this point Frank Ocean just after he released Thinking About You. I mean, it was available. I'm not sure it was released, but people were playing it in kind of the summer of 2011. And I hadn't heard the mixtape that came before that, so I downloaded that, and then I downloaded another 60 songs that were available online that he'd recorded for other people and had versions of himself, but he'd never really put out. So there's this thing about Frank Ocean where he was a songwriter for all kinds of pop artists, basically R&B artists, pop artists in the late 2000s, and his output is enormous. Actually, at a very young age, he was writing furiously, like and not really similar to the stuff he ended up recording under his own name as albums. I mean, this is more sort of pop R&B stuff, but I loved it when I found it. It was just exactly right for me. That it was all about kind of a heartbreak. It was all about this very plaintive kind of longing that he was experiencing at the time, which he later explained on the release of the Channel Orange album. But it got me in a way that I hadn't been got by an artist since my, I don't know, 20s maybe. I don't think I'd been that consumed by the output of an artist since that time. And that for me was like a huge part of my life. And I still listen to those songs sometimes. It's almost nostalgic now to listen to those songs and kind of be in that moment. But that's the Scorpio energy of reaching out and making a connection that is super close. So when Scorpio actually makes this connection with you, it is an absolutely intense level. I mean, it can be. It's not that all connections Scorpio makes are on an intense level, but when they care about something, when they desire something, when they really want something, for them it has to be extremely strong. Maybe intense is putting it too extremely. But if you know a Scorpio, and if you've been involved with that kind of person, you'll know what I mean. So he then had a run-in with his record label because of control issues, and I think he has very strong control issues in most areas. He's very careful about how he's exposed to the public, doesn't really do social media, is a modern artist that doesn't need to actually do any of that kind of thing, unlike some. So this is all, to me, very Scorpion qualities, and I do sometimes feel that some of the most iconic music artists in history exhibit their sun sign in a way that is really strange. Like, I don't want to be a sun sign astrologer that puts everybody into 12 categories and says, well, you were born on May the 4th, so I know everything about you as a Taurus. Of course not. And we can look at all the charts of those three, and we can see all kinds of other things going on there in their charts. But the essence of their energy, I think all these three artists is very, very Scorpio. And when a Scorpio goes public with their inner self, there's going to be this intense sort of almost difficulty coming out. And with all those three artists, they exhibit this struggle that comes out, and it's like, this is my struggle in public, and that must be tough. that must be hard for a Scorpio, because they don't really like being revealed or exposed, or other people seeing their private side. And it seems true of Frank Ocean that after this first album of unrequited love songs, he hasn't found it easy to make another record that is quite as personal as that. I mean, the second album is also, I'm not such a fan of it as the first one, but I do love a lot of the tracks on it, and I listen to it. But to me, although the production is incredible, the soundscapes on that album are amazing, it doesn't get me like the first one does. And I think that for him there's an issue there of a kind of a, where do I go from here? It's like I've and maybe it's uncomfortable, to be giving that private stuff out, because when you write those songs in the first place, you don't imagine perhaps they're going to be eventually listened to by the millions of people that have listened to that music. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but that's something I think about. Other Scorpio artists includes some interesting ones. Johnny Marr from the Smiths, who he wasn't very vocal when he was in the Smiths. He never really said much. He allowed Morrissey to do the talking, but when it came to the crunch, and would he stand with the rest of the band or would he stand with Morrissey, he was very clear on who he was standing with. And he's very that was a surprise to everybody when the Smiths split up. And I think people imagined somehow that maybe they could get back together, but that was never going to happen. They were Morrissey has the moon in Scorpio. He's a Gemini, so he's pretty stubborn, and so is Johnny Marr. Neil Young, very similar to the artists I mentioned in terms of how much individualism is in his art. Ennio Morricone, summoning up all that energy from within to make these fantastic soundtracks. Drake, Scorpio. Also interesting one on this list, one more that Gregory Porter. Again, he's someone that is within a genre but not within a genre, just like the other artists I mentioned. He's not really a jazz artist or a soul artist as such. He's very much his own. He has his own kind of thing, just like the other three that I mentioned at the beginning. There's not really a genre you can comfortably just whack them into. So, yeah, Gregory Porter. Huge fan, Gregory Porter. I saw him live in Paris, I don't know, 2013 maybe. Fantastic. Maybe 2014. Okay. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about Scorpio. I have done mixes on Spotify for every sign. Not mixes, just playlists for every sign of the zodiac. So if you want to hear songs like what I think are great songs by the same sun sign artist, you can check out my Spotify, which is Antastico, just like my Twitter is Antastico. If you want to check out the songs I put on there, if you think you might have similar music taste to me, and nobody quite does really because of my genre hopping, but we'll see if you like them. Okay, all right, well, that's all for this edition. Thank you very much. Don't be shy, put something in the comments. I don't get many comments, so if I got a comment it would make my day. I've had some likes, which is nice, but if you want to like, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. if you got any feedback, you'd like me to talk about something more than you'd like me to do something on anything, just let me know, and I will see what I can do. All right. So thank you so much. It's going to be interesting this week. So let's see what happens and report back next time. Take care. Bye bye.